Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Another week's gone by and here we are, lots been happening, and we're back again to cast our beady eye over the events of the last week. And to help me do that, but before I do that, before Techie will give me into trouble if I don't say this, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, please do, and the like button. That way we get better algorithms on the YouTube channel. So if you could do that. But to help me today with everything, I am joined from Korea, I believe, this week with by Phil Boswell. Phil, my friend, how are you? Nice to see you.
And you, Roddy, all well in Korea?
Good, that's what I like to hear. We've got a very international show this week, Joe. We've got up there in Clackmannanshire, of course. We have Eva.
Hi, Roddy. Another very busy week indeed in political terms in Scotland and for Scotland. So looking forward very much to some controversy today again.
Oh, I'm sure we can accommodate that, Eva, as you know. And down there in London town, in the old smoke, is our Dr. Yvonne Ridley, or Che Guevara, as we like to call her. Yvonne, how are you, my friend?
Yes, I'm fine, Roddy. Of course, the trouble is, being down in London, I haven't a clue what is going on in Scotland. It rarely makes the news. So,
well, I'm sure you'll be able to participate, no problem at all. I'm also delighted to say, as a very, very special guest this week, who was meant to be with us last week, who had a wee accident, as you know. We're delighted to welcome the leader of the ISP, Colette Walker. Colette, my friend, how are you?
Hello, Roddy. I'm fine, thank you.
Good. How's your
foot? Living to tell the tale.
Yeah, how's your foot after last week?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. We're okay. We're okay.
Got a wee limp?
Just for a couple of days. It was just tissue damage. Thankfully, it was just tissue damage. Nothing was broken, and she didn't kill my dog, so that was quite good.
That's good. But if there's any pain, if you take a large measure of gin and tonic 3 times a day, it takes away all the pain. Well, it does.
That's funny. I was only told to take paracetamol, Roddy.
I think you're better with the gin and tonic. It works for me. I've got no pain. So here we are, folks, again. As I say, it's been a hell of a week, as usual. And one of the big things, and it's something that we really need to pay attention to, it's one of the main tenets for us in the independence movement, nuclear weapons. They're a problem, and they're sitting in the River Clyde, 30 minutes away from Glasgow city centre. And there was a slight accident, and Neil Hanvey, MP, one of the 2 independence MPs down there, brought it up in the House of Commons. Techie, can you play us the video?
Weeks.
Neil Hanvey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A whistleblower has alleged that HMNB Clyde staff were recently moved from Building 201 in Coalport, where warheads are managed, to a Building 41 elsewhere due to a serious radiation breach. Can the Minister advise me of the following? How many such events have been registered in the past 3 years? How many such incidents have been reported to the public? And if not, can the Minister please set out why the people of Scotland, who are overwhelmingly opposed to weapons of mass destruction, are ignored by the Westminster parties, including his?
The honourable member has read out a list of claims. I'll be happy to write to him to answer those claims. I suspect the people of Scotland now are rather thankful they have a nuclear deterrent in face of a very provocative Putin.
Caroline Ansell.
Phil, the evasion, it doesn't matter what the question is. This time it happens to be on the very serious question of radiation leakage. But no matter what the question at Westminster, you never get the straight answer, and you always get the dig. It's just not acceptable.
It's not, and this guy's a warmonger. He's a hawk, the Defence Minister. I worked at Rosyth, and Rosyth is obviously a base. We're talking about Faz Lane here as another base, Coalports, where the warheads are held. And there's been 500 safety incidents with nuclear subs since 2006, half of them in the last 4 years. Now, when I was there, things were getting run down. It was becoming more and more privatised. Everything is being privatised, so it's all for profit. And strategically, strategically, even just being there is a threat to us. So leaks and accidents aside, I mean, the strategic approach or strategy for nuclear war, and by God, we're getting horrendously close to it with what we're doing with the Russians and the Chinese. It merits 2 nuclear warheads striking Faslane, which takes out the central belt completely. And 2 weeks ago, I was in Hiroshima, and there's an incredible museum there that just it makes you cry. Man's inhumanity to man. The only time we've ever used nuclear weapons on human beings, twice in Japan. It's horrific, and it really doesn't bear thinking about. So no, what I want to know is why all our MPs at Westminster were up in arms and shouting at the rooftops about this.
Yeah, and the other thing, of course, Eva, is that Phil talks about Hiroshima. The weapons we've got at Coalport and in Faslane, 100, 1,000 times more powerful. And the ones, if they do hit us, will be a lot worse than Hiroshima. But what gets me is that everyone in Scotland, the majority, my entire life, have been opposed to nuclear weapons on the Clyde and nuclear weapons. So we're not a colony, apparently, but we still are unable to remove these weapons of mass destruction, these vile things from our shores. Not good.
Well, in the first instance, Roddy, I would say that not for the first time I take my hat off to Neil Hanvey and the Alba Party for promoting and prioritising the interests of Scotland at Westminster, because yet again, had it not been for Neil and research and information provided to or by Alba, this particular event is likely to not have seen the light of day. As far as I know, there are no SNP MPs who have commented about this at all. And I find it pretty difficult to believe that they didn't know about it and couldn't have said something about it, at least afterwards, if not at the time. So I think there are 44 SNP MPs at Westminster. We hardly hear from them, and when we do, they have very little to say in the context of independence. And Neil hit the nail on the head right there. You know, bairns, not bombs. That's why we elected the SNP, and it's why we seek independence. And, you know, as you said yourself, this thread of CND and total opposition to nuclear warfare and nuclear weaponry runs right through the independence movement. It's one of the other golden threads about democracy and about humanity and about the ambitions for our country and what we could do on a worldwide stage were we independent and seem to be promoting peace. And the fact that, unfortunately, the SNP continue to sit on their hands and we hear nothing about the promotion of independence. Instead, what we hear is the desire on the part of the SNP to ensure that when Alistair Jack goes to the House of Lords, there's a by-election for his Westminster seat. It says all you need to know about the motivations of that party. So I would say strongly to the people of Scotland that if they actually want independence and they want Scotland to be free of nuclear weaponry once and for all, unfortunately for now, the path to that destination does not seem to be with a party who remain effete and ineffectual and at times almost disinterested in Scotland's interests. We have to have people who are on the rise and on the march towards independence with people power who demand a constitutional convention and who say to the SNP, this carry on that Neil has exposed ought to be a final straw. It should be a signal to the people of Scotland that the SNP need to stand up or get out of the road for the people that are prepared to promote what's best for Scotland and to take a stand against all these things that are imposed upon us by a Westminster government we did not elect and we seem to be powerless to get rid of unless we walk out of there en masse.
Thank you. Colette, the ISP, speak for you are an anti-nuclear party as well, am I right?
Absolutely. What I found incredible, just what Yvonne was saying at the start with her being in London and not getting the media coverage regarding Scottish topics down there. We never heard anything about this on our media here in Scotland. So, you know, again, if it wasn't for Neil bringing this up in the House of Commons, it went completely unpublicised about what was classed as a serious radiation leak. You know, so this isn't just a wee minor story here that can just get fobbed off. This is a very serious, dangerous topic that should have been covered in the media in Scotland, and people should actually really know what's happening in Faslane. And for Ben Wallace to actually turn round and say that Scotland will be thankful that we have nuclear weapons of mass destruction here, that just shows you how out of touch he is with how Scotland feels about what we have at Faslane. If you really want weapons of mass destruction, take them down to the Thames and have them sitting right outside the House of Commons then, because we certainly don't want them here.
Yeah, here. What about you, Yvonne? Were you thankful that we've got nuclear weapons sitting in the Clyde?
Well, if Ben Wallace had a brain, he'd be dangerous. I mean, that comment right at the end was so offensive. And we need to get a compilation of all of these derogatory comments that are made in Westminster and put them together, just so people in Scotland, because there are still those who will vote Tory, God knows why, and God knows who they are. You know, we need to get a compilation of this and done so they can see the racism and contempt at play in Westminster towards Scotland. I, you know, as Colette had said, I had no idea that this leak had happened. We've had the headlines of nuclear leaks all over the war in Ukraine, where it's big news. This is on our doorstep, and not a word is said about it. It's incredible, and you know, well done, Neil Hanby, for standing up in the British Parliament and raising it. And do I?
You know that the minister says, "Oh, I'll write to you," because they don't want to verbally tell you the truth. So we'll send a letter to try and keep it out the public domain. If you're watching, Neil, as I'm sure you are, make sure we get told about it when you get your letter.
Yeah, I would like to read that. I bet it comes second class as well. You know, there's just no urgency. It's a nuclear leak, and yet, you know, the headlines that have been dominating over the war in Ukraine have focused purely on the nuclear site up there that's in danger of having leaks as well. But yeah, well done, Neil. And do I congratulate the SNP for not walking out?
I've said nothing. We're getting enough trouble last time. But while this was going on, there was a public audit committee, Eva, about the crushing poverty issues for children in the 21st century in Scotland with chilblains, with hunger, you know, teachers having to try and feed kids who are starving. And meanwhile, our First Minister's over at Cox, throwing money about like a drunken sailor, as they would say. 5 million for here and a couple of million quid for this. Well, we've got kids lying in poverty. Now, I'm all for foreign aid, absolutely, and I'm all for climate change. But we've got pressing issues at home, Eva, that need taken care of.
Well, to deal first of all with the First Minister's attendance at COP27, where I have some issues surrounding this is that we've had a climate justice fund since I think about 2012 or so, and that's a good thing, and I'm in favour of it. And it has a budget, and it has a plan, and there is money committed there for the entirety of the current Scottish Parliament up until 2026. So there is already a climate justice fund. What the First Minister did, though, was she announced the provision of the sum of £5 million towards the Loss and Damage Fund, having previously committed £2 million towards that last year in Glasgow. What is unclear is to where that extra £5 million pledged this week came from. Is it £5 million that has come from out with the Climate Justice Fund this week? And if so, where did it come from? I've asked the question, it has not been answered. If it is £5 million that was pre-existing within the Climate Justice Fund, then the exclusive reveal announcement this week was nothing but virtue signalling. And I think the people of Scotland, especially now, deserve an answer as to whether that was new money and the source should be disclosed, or whether it was old money. Because if the former is the case, then it means that a Scottish domestic budget is suffering. If the latter is the case, then it strongly suggests that the announcement was made for the purposes of self-promotion as opposed to promotion of Scotland on the world stage. And with that in mind, the other strand of the First Minister's attendance at COP27, which seriously troubles me, and I know Yvonne and also Colette will be concerned about this, is that very much was made in the publicity created by the Scottish Government that Ms Sturgeon was there to represent women's interests and gender equality and the like. And she spoke at some conference where I think there were 4 or 5 other women beside her, and she spoke to some French women about these things as well, to do with gender balance and gender representation and the way that the gender issue is highlighted by climate change problems. And she said in particular that women are more greatly affected by the impact of climate change than men are. And I found that terribly troubling, because while she was there making those addresses and having those conversations with others, mainly women, and while she was emphasising in an event organised by the New York Times that women have voices which ought to be heard as much as the voices of men, her government, instructed by her, paid by us, the taxpayer, were in court arguing the definition of women for the purposes of gender representation on public bodies. And in that regard, what was being claimed was that a male-born person with a gender recognition certificate who had become female was in fact and in law, for all intents and purposes, now female. Now, you cannot have it both ways. You cannot go on the world stage and promote the interests of women and girls on the one hand, if on the other, in a domestic context, you are in effect doing away with the definition of women as a single-sex class. It is hypocrisy beyond belief, and it's not acceptable to me, and I think to most of the women of Scotland. So I think the First Minister has raised more questions than provided answers this week. I'll be interested to see her being pressed to give answers, A, on the funding, and B, on the definition of women for the purposes of climate change and related matters.
So did you feel, Colette, that Nicola Sturgeon was representing you as a adult human female?
Let me think about that one. No, is the answer. Sadly, Eva, I really don't think that a lot of people that would be listening to Nicola Sturgeon actually knows what is actually going on regarding the definition of women in Scotland and going to court, or really thinking out the box of what actually Nicola is actually saying. You know, this mixing up between women, gender and sex, I'm fed up with the gender pay gap and gender inequality. Really, we're going, what is gender? Because if you look up the Scottish Government website and you look up the definition of gender, there's no definition of gender. So what does that actually really mean anyway? What are we representing? What are they representing? Who are they representing? We are females, as you said, Roddy, female and male, and that is sex. So when it comes down to what Eva was saying there about, you know, climate change and affecting the 51 to 52% of the population, which is female, sex-based, it's sex-based pay, it's sex-based work, environmental issues. It's not gender. Language matters, and they're using it to their own advantage now to mix people up between women gender and sex. We're going to have to start being really quite brutal now about exactly the language that we're using, because they're using it to their advantage. We're going to have to start using it to our advantage and informing more people exactly what's going on. But yeah, the money that she's spending, as Eva said, we need to know whether it's new, old money, where is it coming from. But you know, years and years ago when I worked in nurseries, and in some of them quite deprived nurseries, you know, I used to have children coming in 2-3 years of age, and they hadn't been fed all weekend. They were dirty, we had to bathe them, and they were literally starving. Now that was 25 years ago, Roddy. We're in now 20.
Colette.
Thank you. I'll pay you later. But you know, 25 years later, and I, you know, I mean, I was a young woman just starting on my career looking after children, and I was mortified at how these young babies, young infants were coming in, and I still remember some of the children back then thinking, how did they turn out? Because we done everything for them that we could possibly do within our regulations, what we could do legally with them to help them. But you know, 25 years on in 2022, I wonder still to this day, because it does have a lasting impact on you. How do these people turn out? Because if our children aren't properly fed and watered, their education, their mental health, their emotional, physical health, that's all completely stunted from very early on, and that's the crucial years of a child's development into young adulthood. And if we're still here in 2022 talking about 1 in 3, now probably 1 in 4, whatever it is, because the statistics change, they're living in poverty, and their families are actually having to do without a meal to try and feed their children. We haven't really moved on very far in 25 years then, if that's still what we're talking about. And it's going to keep going on generation after generation, because in 25 years, the children of just now who are being starved and not being educated properly, they're going to be the poor ones again.
Sure.
It's
rising all the time. I believe it's about 40% of all children now are living in poverty. Phil, the question I want to ask now, you and I are supportive of the ladies, and we're supportive of women's rights, and but when Nicola Sturgeon-Brown says, you know, it's going to affect women more than men. Now, don't get me, if I'm not wrong, global warming, if we're to believe everything that's true, will result in rising sea levels, which means people will drown. Is Nicola trying to say that men won't drown? Why? But women will drown more. I mean, it's a nonsense. Everyone is affected by climate change, or not.
Well, there's a few things on that one.
I know you're.
Yeah, there's a few.
Just saying, the point is, I don't think women, apart from their usual mothering roles, etc., and it's this thing she hides behind, as if she's a real feminist, and uses it as some kind of shield to project when it's not genuine.
Well, there's an element, no doubt, of that. She's certainly a virtue signaller and is very fond of bandwagons. I'm sure there is data out there that show that impoverishment, is particularly around climate change, can impact families and women who generally look after families in these poorer countries. Are harder hit, but I'm not an expert on that. But there's a lot of assumptions here. What we're seeing is virtue signaling. Well, she's spending money we don't have on something we can't even measure if it's effective or not. As Eva points out, Nicola's probably repledging $5 million for reparations for climate disasters in poor countries. But I've got many issues with this. The poverty the ladies have already talked extensively on. That's horrific, absolutely horrific. And in an energy-rich country that's a rich country like ours, we should not be having poverty like this. And the answer is independence. So no dancing about anything, avoiding the issue. It's independence. But here's the things I've got issues about: these assumptions that Nicola makes about climate change. She knows nothing about climate change. She's got no background or expertise on it. You know, our people are starving and going cold, as Eva tweeted, and she's pledging to give money we should better spend on looking after our own. Instead of gaining indie, when we could be in a position to remove the scourge that is poverty in our country. She has no experience of the science of climate change, but rolls on with the virtual signalling. And what's the biggest greenhouse gas? It's not CO2, it's water vapor or clouds, which we can't even understand the impact on climate. She assumes reparations are due. It's not proven. It's not proven that man's contributions make any difference to overall changes in planetary weather. Is the climate changing? Undoubtedly. Should we reduce pollution? Undoubtedly. Should you keep plastic out? There's a lot of sensible things mixed up in this, but we can't measure that what we do now reverses climate change will make any difference because of the incremental margin of error in future forecasts. And these forecasts are unreliable to begin with, but as you forecast further and further into the future, the unreliability of the measurement magnifies as you move forward in time. The errors accumulate. It's science. It's statistics. So even if we spend the trillions on this that are being spoken about, forget 5 million. That's not going to do anything. We won't be able to tell if it worked. That's why the forecasting models have all been wrong all so far. And then there's the fact that since we can't measure what difference we're making, why are we spending all this money while people like Al Gore and these investors in green energy companies make obscene profits? The traditional energy companies are moving to green energy. Do you think the corporations are moving into green energy because they care about you? Or do you think they're doing it because they care about profit? Al Gore left office in 2001 as a VP with 1.7 million. He sold cattle to put his kids through college. Follow the money. There's too much on this to go into any detail. But separating the science and from the climate change and the politics around it is almost impossible. But these cataclysmic forecasts, even if they're true, there's a big problem that I've got, and that CO2 is a fertilizer. It's plant food, and that's back to what we talked about before, nat4 biology and photosynthesis. Remember that? Remember these basic scientific. Anyway, I don't want to go on too long about it, but I've got serious issue about this. And one of the big ones in CO2 is around 150 parts per million of CO2 in air. Most plant life dies on a massive scale. And we're at 400, and previously on Earth, we measured it in thousands of parts per million. I am not concerned about this, but you think about what's going on when you're paying your extortionately, and that's exactly the correct word, electricity and gas bills this winter. You're getting ripped off. We're being conned. They're using a legitimate concern, egging it up, exaggerating it, and the people are paying the price.
Not quite the question I asked, but very interesting there. Oh, very interesting. We were talking there, Yvonne, about Nicola talking about being a feminist to her fingertips and worried about the climate change affecting women. At the same time, on science as well, we're discussing the biology denying GRR bill is working its way through Holyrood. And it's now come to light that there's, I'll just check my notes here, 100 amendments to the first reading, Yvonne. However, the Scottish business government whips are only allowing 2 weeks to discuss 100 amendments. Is that enough time, or is democracy being squeezed here?
Of course, it's not enough time. And Nicola Sturgeon, she is no feminist. And she has managed to alienate herself from most feminists out there. And it's quite astonishing what she's achieved in a truss sort of way since she took the reins of the SNP. She took charge of one of the most progressive governments in the world, and she's now leading it towards a cliff edge on this whole gender recognition debate. And it's the damage that she's done, the carnage that she's creating within her own party, membership is said to be hemorrhaging, and I heard the other day it's down to 25,000. All because of this issue that she's determined to push through. And women have made it quite clear through various worthy organisations lobbying Holyrood that they are against this legislation from a safeguarding, primarily a safeguarding issue. And she has just driven this craziness without stopping, without pause, without time to reflect. She's used the fear factor among her own politicians who've been whipped into shape before the voting has begun. And she's acting, she's just obsessed about this whole business. And now that people are finally waking up to it, they're mortified that Scotland is going to become known as the sort of gender capital of the world, because what she's doing, Scotland's known for Gretna Green and 16-year-olds being able to run away from home and get married. And very soon, if Nicola Sturgeon gets her own way, Scotland will become known as the place where 16-year-olds can go and change their gender without medical support. And it's just crazy, but I really suspect that in stage 2, this legislation will hit the buffers. And I'm sure that it will come off the tracks. And it could be as soon as a couple of weeks.
Oh, you're right. What do you think, Eva? 100 amendments, 2 weeks to discuss them, enough time?
Absolutely nowhere near enough time to give such a serious topic the amount of proper attention and scrutiny that it desires. But the issue here, as we pointed out before, is as soon as the majority of the population realise what's actually involved, they're very opposed to this. The intent, I think, from the government was it would almost be sneaked through because we were too thick to understand what was actually being promoted. In the real world, what's required is, as I've said before, SNP MPs must establish a spine, and they must decide whether they're going to be supine and crawl on their hands and knees to their great leader, or whether they're going to learn to stand on their own 2 feet and do what the vast majority of the population require. By their deeds shall they be known. And if I actually thought that the SNP MPs for whom I've campaigned and contributed funds to actually had the gall to vote for a policy that says, to all intents and purposes, in law and in fact, a man can become a woman on the basis of the lack of definition of gender, the lack of definition or specification of gender identity, and on a declaration made before a lawyer and notary public that says, I have decided to change my gender and I have lived in my new gender for 3 months, and that's it. There are no other explanations about what that means. That gives all men access to all female spaces. That is anathema. It is completely wrong. It is positively harmful, and it is not the purpose of the Scottish National Party. Their primary concern was independence and the promotion of all Scotland's interests. This drives a coach and horses through those ambitions, and it is an insult to the women and the girls of Scotland who deserve far, far better.
Yeah. Colette, I have to say to you, you were the first political party and the first political leader to draw attention to this and oppose it, and you've paid a heavy price for it. Now that you see it getting nearer completion in Holyrood, you must be as concerned today as you were the first time you brought it up.
Well, I think, even before ISP was formed, the harassment and the abuse that I was getting for standing through my principles and morals. and yeah, it was a tough time, and but I had a lot of support, and if it wasn't for the support that I got from a lot of the women that are still around, still calling this out, it would have been really difficult for me as a disabled woman to actually continue with the fight because of the harassment. But my concern, and it always has been my concern, especially when I saw when the consultations came out for the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, was that it was very difficult for me to find on the Scottish parliamentary website where a lot of the consultations are found it very difficult. The links that were sent were not sent to all other women groups. It was just ones that were in favour of it. But it wasn't just for Scottish women. It was sent all round the world. Why were we allowing people from Canada, etc., to fill out a consultation on a bill that was for Scotland? I found that really, really concerning. The women of Scotland, one, really didn't know about this bill anyway, because they didn't really speak about it unless they heard it from the likes of myself, Yvonne and Eva, etc. But it was sent round the world to organisations and political parties, etc., that were in favour of self-identification. So that should have sent red flags right away. The 100 amendments, absolutely no time at all. They're just wanting people to have no acknowledgement of what they're talking about, and obviously it's whipped, so they're just getting told what to do anyway. That's not democracy. This is a human right. And again, we talk about women and children's rights. Well, I think you know, Roddy, I've been saying for years, I've got a disabled son, and he uses social care. My son's totally blind and non-verbal. I need to trust people that are going to be looking after my son on his physical care. Now, if I wanted an all-female workforce, when this comes through, I have no legal right if a male-bodied person comes through because they've just declared that after 3 months that they're living in this gender. I can't do anything about that, and my son's completely vulnerable. And then you're looking at the older people that have got maybe dementia, etc. So this is a much wider issue than just women and children. We've got very vulnerable people in society that we need to know exactly who are looking after them and their intentions of looking after them, and that we trust them to look after them. Because, or is it just that they're basically the social worker on their knees, that they just want the families to look after them anyway, which will end up being the case, because if you can't trust your support staff, then you'll end up just looking after them anyway. So this is a much wider problem than just and who's going to police this? One thing that I've always wanted to put forward, especially to Shona Robertson, when she says about if you declare it and then you go against your declaration, who's policing this? Who you know?
Well, no, the SNP, probably Fifi Robertson and John Kellerman.
Because again, even what happened with me last week, nothing has been done about that. The police are so, they're just so busy. They've got so much and many other things to do. Who actually is going to police that somebody actually has went against their declaration of living in a gender?
Well, the answer is I don't think they will. But I'm like Yvonne. I'm thinking that this thing will, whether it dies in the courts or doesn't get through, I think it'll get through Holyrood. But I think it will die in the courts. I think there'll be so many pieces of people bringing it to court that it will die a death, and I hope. But while all this is going on, we speak of all the things we've spoken about, with the exception of GRR. Independence is what we need, Phil. We need to get to hell out of Westminster. But there's two things happened in Westminster this week to make it a bit more difficult, as if it wasn't hard enough. One of them was the Ian Paisley Jr., the son of the famous man, has introduced a bill into Westminster saying that they want to have supermajorities for any future referendums. And I saw, I don't know the lady, a nice lady from Sinn Féin was talking at some Sinn Féin. She went, if 50% plus ones was good enough to take us into the British Union, 50% plus ones enough to take us out of it. But there is no trick that they won't resort to keep us in line. And the other one, just before you answer that one, is the other one that happened was they're removing 8 constituencies from Wales and 2 constituencies from Scotland, and giving 10 extra constituencies to England. Now, if the British Union wasn't already imbalanced, this makes it even worse.
Yeah, it does, and it's a supermajority and gerrymandering is what we're seeing. Ian, I know or knew from Parliament, and he was one of the first to get an Irish passport when Brexit was foisted upon us. There are reports, and this is very serious, that lowest paramilitaries organisations are threatening unionists who take up an Irish passport, which is an absolute disgrace if true. Now, you know, you've got that. I've been aware of that for a while. So, you know, maybe Ian is just trying to show his loyalty by doing this. But I don't think it will fly. But those who run Britain will do, as you say, Roddy, anything to keep Scotland. It's too resource-rich to let go. But in terms of the seats, the increasing in the imperialism, it's gerrymandering. Elbridge Gerry, the governor of Massachusetts, 1812, he redrew the electoral boundaries to favour his party. So that's what gerrymandering is. It's the political manipulation of electoral district or boundaries with the intent of creating undue advantage. And that's exactly what else can we describe what Westminster are doing as? It's they're changing the UK constitutional map, and the Sinn Féin, they were absolutely right. If 50% plus one takes us out, it takes us into this, then 50% plus one will take us out. And that's what we should be fighting for. Exactly the same issue. And that's why we're aligned. And we, and our First Minister, should be more aligned, and our parties should be more aligned with what Sinn Féin are doing than what the Unionists would seek to impose upon us.
It's like Sucky Hall Street in here today. Usually there's no one here. Anyway, Yvonne, 10 new English MPs, Wales losing 8, us losing 2. They're not doing much to encourage us that it's an all-encompassing union of equals, are they?
No, they're not. But at the same time, what are we doing about it? I would have thought that the Welsh would have been up in arms. But the only news that I've had coming out of Wales is that the First Minister has got COVID. And, you know, this should be headline news. The Welsh should really be outraged at what Phil quite rightly describes as gerrymandering. And I'm not sure which 2 seats are affected in Scotland, but you can bet your bottom dollar there won't be Tory seats.
Yeah, well, I believe Glasgow Central is one of them. And they're splitting Moray into 2, which would give them an extra Tory seat, because it's a nice Tory area.
Well, if they're targeting Glasgow, then they're making it personal, aren't they? And they're targeting Sturgeon, who, well, quite frankly, I think she might have a bit of a battle on her in her own backyard, depending on who is put up against her.
Well, I don't know. Her CV will have been well distributed when she was at COP27, I'm sure. She might be long gone before then. Eva, 10 new English MPs.
Great, fantastic news. Best news all year.
Because it means now with two less MPs, if we get a plebiscite election, it means we've got 1 seat less to win.
This is exactly the point, Roddy, and that's why it's great news. I was born in 1962 and Scotland had 71 MPs in Westminster. Here I am in my bus pass year and we've managed to reduce it down below 60. And before you know where we are, it's going to be below 50. In a couple of years, it's going to be 0. So Westminster's doing the job that the SNP have signally failed to do. On a very positive note, though, one of the people that will not have to go back to Westminster will be Dave Duggan, because his seat in Angus is one of the ones that's disappeared. And I know that Dave will be delighted by that because he wants independence just as much as I do. So this is a positive development, actually, for Scotland. And after all, as we all know, the SNP don't want to be there. And they've already said, as you've alluded to there, Roddy, the next general election, if we're not voted yes in a referendum by then, the next general election is going to be a plebiscite anyway. So it's all the less seats we have to win and all the fewer votes that we have to get under a Scotland United ticket. So actually, every cloud has a silver lining, and that's exactly what this is.
Colette, here's the thing that I found quite bizarre. As we've all alluded to, we're having a referendum October next year, and if not, we're going to have this plebiscite election yet. The SNP members have been complaining bitterly that we're losing 2 seats. They've also tried to get Stirling to be the city of British culture in 2024. If we're leaving in 2023, these are not the actions of people who feel confident that they're going to get us free in 2023, is it? No,
but I think we all know that 2023 is a pipe dream. Really, it's really not going to happen, unfortunately. And again, with what we're saying about the seats, I don't know when this is going to be amended and then put in force. Are they going to, is it going to be a recent thing? How long are we going to wait for the next general election? Are they going to try and get a general election in before this actually happens? Because obviously, who knows what's happening in Westminster when a general election is looming, because you blink an eye and there's movement in Westminster of one form or another. So everything's up in arms at the present moment. It's so unstable. And I remember, we all talk about, obviously we're talking about independence, and we talk about the things that were said leading up to 2014 about how, we were going to be a nation of equals and all the rest of it, and how it's going to be Scotland, it's going to be a much fairer, equal formation. And you're just saying, well, how possibly can that be the case? That you're wanting to, they won't be seeing it the way that that Eva's seen it regarding a plebiscite. They're just wanting to see it as 2 less Scottish MPs going down to Westminster, and trying to kind of keep us quiet, cancel us really from any debates. So it's like a boxing match. It's like red corner, blue corner. It really, I don't know. We're each playing off each other.
As independentistas, it's irrespective. Who cares? But it also means, as just has been pointed out by Phil here, it means less short money coming to Scotland. But yeah, what's about that? But the other thing, Yvonne, has been going on this week, which I think worthy of discussion here, is the new king. I still can't get used to calling him King Charles. I find it difficult. And I have to make my declaration. I am, of course, a known Republican. But he's in York, which was the second city of England for years, getting eggs chucked at him and booed. Now, this would never have happened to the previous monarch. I think there was too much respect for her, and as opposed to the monarchy. But it seems to be creeping into society, Yvonne, that people are just starting to say, nah, not in the 21st century.
Well, he's not as popular as his mother, that's for sure. And Scotland has been love-bombed in an extraordinary way. There are various people who I don't know how they can say this, but they say that the Queen deliberately chose Scotland as her place to peel off this mortal coil. I mean, I don't know if she looked in her diary and said, right, we're moving to Scotland, and who knows? But certainly Scotland has been love-bombed by the royals, and I think we're going to see a lot more of it, because I think that the royals know that their future hinges on Scotland and what is going to happen here. There are so many huge organisations that are relying on Scotland's wealth to remain in power, and the royals are one of them. And they need, this is where they come for their holidays, and they need Scotland more than
we need them.
Well, yes, quite.
Their jackets on a sugary peg, Eva. I know, I think the clock's ticking along here, and there's a couple of things I want to get in before we finish. And I know there's one that Phil's going to talk on even more than he did on the climate change. We weren't really talking about. But that is that Nicola Sturgeon had her first meeting with her, whatever it is, fourth Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, at Blackpool. And of course, that was for a British-Irish Council meeting, which involved Scotland, Wales, the Isle of Man, the Channel Islands, but not Northern Ireland, because the British Unionists over there are playing silly buggers, and they don't like the election result that they lost. They don't want to play the junior partner to Sinn Féin in the Stormont. And so Michelle O'Neill, the lovely Michelle O'Neill, couldn't come over. She wasn't allowed to be invited. I'm of the opinion, as an independentista and someone who's trying to end the British Union, our First Minister should have said, no, I'm sorry. The British democracy is not working here. This isn't a British-Irish Council without the First Minister of Northern Ireland. And so I will not be going either. And that's what I believe should have happened. What do you think, Eva?
I tend to agree with you, Roddy, because it's called the British-Irish Council for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And if the Westminster government actually was democratic, there would be steps taken, they would have been taken long before now, but they'd be taken certainly by Sunak upon his election, requiring that Stormont actually sat, and that the democratically elected First Minister-elect was actually able to take her position and start governing the country for the good of the people there. The fact that Westminster is not requiring Stormont to do that speaks volumes. It clearly suits Westminster's agenda just now that Northern Ireland remains very much in limbo, and they're running away at Westminster from the impact of Brexit and the difficulties that arise from all the trade and other issues that need still to be resolved in practical terms. They've got their heads in the sand or in the clouds, but certainly not where they should be. So from a Scottish perspective, through a Scottish prism, I'd like to think that a Scottish First Minister would have had the courage to spell out to the others in the British-Irish Council, this ought not to be happening. One of our important partners is not here. That partner is not represented as a result of the misconduct of the
British Unionists
of Northern Ireland, who've refused to accept a democratic result. So I agree with you that there should have been something said and done to have a greater impact on what's going on in Northern Ireland. You can't pretend to be part of a four-nation union if you're not going to stick up for one of the other smaller nations. And I think they're getting the photos taken with the big beaming smiles with somebody that you're supposed to detest on the one hand, and on the other, us and the public not knowing what's been achieved by the British-Irish Council in the absence of one of its constituent members tells us that there's something very wrong at the heart of democracy in the UK.
Yeah, there is absolutely. Phil, I mean, the other thing is that while this was all going on, Mary Lou MacDonald, the wonderful Mary Lou MacDonald, the leader of the Sinn Féin party in Ireland, said to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, I can't remember what they call them, a citizens' assembly or a civic assembly to start preparing for a united Ireland. And if you don't do it, she said, we'll be doing it as soon as we take over the reins of power. The sort of thing that Eva in particular, has been begging Nicola Sturgeon to do, to have a constitutional convention and prepare for independence. Mary Lou sees it, knows that the British have never been at their weakest as they are now. Meanwhile, we're just doing nothing.
It's a very stark contrast, and that's what's most disconcerting for all of us. It's why we are so animated about this and why we're so angry about it, and rightly so, because some of us cottoned on to the fact that we are not approaching this the way we did under Alex Salmond in the SNP. The change is so striking, but it took us a long time to catch on. No, 100%. We really need to see some action, and Nicola is not, and the current people are not delivering. We know there's lots of other actors there, but where's the cohesiveness? Who can bring this together? The SNP are the only party with the power, the political might to make it happen, and you need political representation to make this happen. We've got the thinkers, we've got the people, we've got the organisation, the people who could fit into that organisation, but without the muscle and the shoulder to the wheel of the SNP, it won't happen. And it's become a situation now where all we can do now is continue to plead with the SNP and to see them not turning and facing their own people and doing what the people want. We are left with little choice but to fight amongst ourselves, which is the last thing that we want as an organisation. This is the last thing that we want to do. And it's becoming obvious that to oust those infiltrators who have corrupted the core principle of the independence movement within the SNP, we have to have some surgery on the SNP, and we need to remove those who are in it for themselves and don't put the people first. And it's as simple as that. And we could go into the detail on this, but there's little point, because without political action, everything else is just talk. We need the vehicle to deliver this. And there's a few ideas that are coming up. I know there's people working on it. We're all doing our bit, but we need cohesion. It's the core principle. It's why we came so close in 2014. And without it, the Brits are winning. The Unionists are winning. They've sown the seeds of corruption within our organisations, and that's why we're at each other's throats. So we have to surgically remove those who are influencing us in a negative way and pull us all together with all stripes, and it should be a broad church as it was in 2014. It's disgraceful.
We're on here. We have a broad church on here with the leader of the ISP, SNP, Alapa Party. Colette, this is we've a broad church here, but it was wrong to be sitting in Blackpool smiling with the Prime Minister, as Eva alludes to, when one of the First Ministers was not allowed to be there. What was the point of having that meeting without that person?
It's I don't know, it's just for show, but my main concern is, Northern Ireland is sitting and it's ungoverned, and the people in Northern Ireland need stability. They need structure. They need people there to actually fight their corner, and especially with Brexit, the DUP are saying about talking about a referendum supermajority. Well, why don't you just form a government and get stuff in your own country and start governing there and get your priorities right? People's priorities are just wavering at the present moment. People in Northern Ireland are struggling. They need someone there to help them with what's going on. They're no different from us. They're no different. They're challenged regarding the fuel crisis and living costs and interest rate. Everybody's struggling at the present moment. We need a government over there. And really, I looked very briefly at the briefing notes of what they discussed, and it was just a talking shop anyway. you know, really what is going to come out of it at the end of the day. And, you know,
whatever England wants is what comes out of it.
Well, exactly. It really is a talking shop, but you know, it's about what is best, because we hear the Scottish government talk when it suits them about Brexit, and Northern Ireland and Scotland didn't vote for Brexit. So it's all very well to be in solidarity when it comes to trade deals and not wanting to leave the EU. But then there's no solidarity when it is like meeting up with you know, in Blackpool, you know. So it is frustrating, but really our main, you know, the main priority really should be at the present moment is for them to actually be discussing getting Stormont up and running and actually governing Northern Ireland.
Sure, they should. I mean, absolutely. And I believe strongly that it would have sent the proper message. The optics should have been good, and it would have let the Sunak know early days, wait a minute, we can't mess all these Celts about. They're hanging together. Unity. It's not just unity in Scotland we need within the independence. We need the unity of the Celts against the oppressor. That's just a fact. We're running right out of time. A couple of things I want to mention. I noticed this week, now sometimes in this programme, maybe we're sometimes too parochial. And we need to look beyond, because there's things happening in the big world that's going to affect us. And one of the things I saw, which gave me a great deal of pleasure, was that China has turned around and removed all agricultural tariffs from Africa, from the entire continent. And this is good news for African farmers, because it means that their goods into China are going to be a lot cheaper. But it's also great news for the Chinese consumer, because they're going to be able to get cheaper agricultural food, plants, whatever, are coming out of Africa. But what it does, the people in the EU who have been exploiting Africa are going to lose supply, just what they don't need at this time. But it's all part of the thing, Phil, with BRICS. And for those of you who don't know what BRICS is, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are forming a group. And they've now had 12 applications of new countries wanting in. There is this new multi-polarity beginning to come up, start, and it's going to change the world, and it's going to change and affect Scotland. People need to pay attention, Phil.
Oh, 100%. The expansion is substantial. It's probably the biggest news for a long time, and it does affect Scotland, because in a unipolarity, USA does exactly what it wants. It wants its wee pet dogs doing what it tells them, and that would not include an independent Scotland, because they lose their missile launching pad, and they don't get a unified Britain lapping up everything it tells, and the potential of Northern Europe and Europe becoming stronger again, and more socialist people running Europe. So no, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, 40% of the world's population, 12 more, I'm not sure who they are, but I mean the growing tensions. It's Saudi Arabia.
Well, there's Algeria, Iran, Afghanistan, I believe UAE and Saudi Arabia.
Argentina. Yeah, it's phenomenal, because Argentina and Iran both signal their interest in Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt have expressed it, and that's well covered. But the China removing tariffs is massive, and 98% of taxable items. But it's from 9 of Africa's least developed nations, and this is massive. The new tariff policy, and it came in September, applies to agriculture and mineral imports, and mineral imports are absolutely critical. From the Central African Republic, from Chad, Djibouti, Eritrea, and Guinea. And I worked on a grain project, the biggest for Rio Tinto, the biggest iron ore reserve in the world. And you've got Mozambique, Rwanda, Sudan, Togo, all where there's a lot of mineral deposits, and China's become very dependent economically on Africa for energy and minerals, cobalt and coal. So it's good for both. But what this signifies, and what's the big picture and how it's affecting the multipolarity, is the Forum in China-Africa cooperation are making big moves. China announced and did something that we have never done for Africa. China announced debt forgiveness for some of Africa's poorest countries. The West, we didn't do that. We just continued to pillage, manipulate, and never deliver on promises of support and development. That's why Africa remained backwards. It's because we didn't do it and follow through what we promised we would. And China is better for Africa than the West was. We had our chance, but we were too greedy. That's why China's in and we're out. The West
it
is out.
comes, just the last comment on it. It's almost like the thing, you know, you give a man a fish for a day and, you know, teach him how to fish. And that's exactly what the Chinese are offering Africa here, the chance of economic to be able to stand their own feet. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the quickest hour and a bit we're actually over in the week. Can I thank you all from London, from South Korea, from Clackmannanshire, and from Clarkson, and Dubai, of course. Next week I'm back in my abode. I fly out tomorrow. And that should be, you see all the movement going on behind me. That's stuff I'm hanging up the suitcase and whatnot to get me ready for going away tomorrow. And I will be back. And can I just remind you once again, folks, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And until we all see you again soon, please, take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.